Hello world, and welcome to another video. So if you are a guitar player, you probably spent a lot of time practicing and learning songs, especially in the beginning. Learning songs is a great way to develop skills, hone techniques, as well as learn a repertoire of material. It probably also influences a lot of the music that you create and songs that you write yourself, especially in the beginning. But as modular synth artists, we probably don't have a lot of songs that we can learn, and you're probably not going to go away and learn songs on your modular synth. So what can you do instead? Well, one of the things that you can focus on instead of learning songs is to learn sounds and develop a repertoire of sounds, and that's what I would like to talk about in this video. But before we do, I would just like to invite you to hit the subscribe button. I know there's a lot of people out there watching these videos that aren't subscribed, and it really would help me and it would help the channel to grow if you would hit the subscribe button. So thank you very much. Or perhaps maybe this is your first time tuning into one of my videos, in which case welcome along and thank you for clicking on the video. Maybe after you've watched this video you also might like to consider hitting the subscribe button. Okay, well, without further ado, let's get into this video. Right, so what I'm kind of getting at here is that as modular synth artists, we don't have a repertoire to learn. Okay, if you are an instrumentalist of some other type, there's usually a repertoire of songs, classic pieces, whatever, that everybody learns, and through learning those songs you learn to play your instrument. But for synth, it's a little bit different. This is something that I think I have talked about before in previous videos, but I'm not going into a great deal of detail about, maybe only just mentioned in passing. But I thought it might be worth just having a little bit more of a deeper look at that today. Yeah, so the idea is that just as a guitarist learns things by covering songs, a modular synth player can learn by recreating sounds. So why might you want to actually do this? Well, what we're talking about here is sound design and practicing the art of sound design. And that is envisioning a sound in your mind and then being able to create that sound in reality through your synth. Okay. Now, if you pursue this and you practice it, then you are going to develop a really good technical understanding of your modules. You're also going to understand signal flow and the way that the signal moves through your synth and through the modules, and the different effects that you will have on that. But also, this is going to hone your ear and your attention to detail. So in the same way as a guitarist is going to listen to songs and then try and work them out and transcribe them and so on, and figure out what's going on in those songs, if we do the same thing with sounds, then we're developing our ear to be able to hear things in much greater detail. And that transfers to an understanding of what's going on with your synth as well. It will also shift your mindset from from sort of randomly patching things and just trying things out and seeing what happens, to it being a little bit more intentional. Now, it's not to say that there's anything wrong with randomly patching things and trying things out, and a lot of the time that's exactly what I do. And that is the fun part of modular, is that sometimes you don't know what's going to happen and it's a nice little surprise. But also there are times when you might want to do something a little bit more intentionally, and by developing this skill of sound design, you are sort of moving a little bit more into that realm of intentional exploration, we might say. So how might you actually go about this? Well, first of all, you need some source material. So perhaps just choosing an interesting sound that you hear in another piece of music, or maybe if you've got like a favorite track or favorite song, just trying to choose something from that piece of music. And it could be just like a bass line, it could be a rhythmic thing, it could be some sort of textural thing or some sort of weird noise. It doesn't really matter what it is, but it's just going to be something that you choose that you're going to try and recreate with your synth. Now, the idea is that you're not necessarily going to try and recreate the entire song or the entire piece of music, whatever it is, but you're just going to focus on that one small part. Okay, now the first thing you probably need to do is to listen to listen very carefully and very deeply to what is going on, and try and hear and try and imagine exactly what's happening. So, you know, what is the shape of the sound? What's happening in terms of like envelope, or what's happening in terms of modulation? What's the texture? What is the source material of that sound? You know, in terms of like an oscillator, does it have the characteristics of a sine wave or a square wave, or what is it? So you're really trying to pick out what is going on in that sound. And once you've done that, then you're probably going to go to the synth and you're going to start trying things out and exploring and trying to recreate some of what you can hear. Of course, you know, your source material doesn't have to be from an existing piece of music. You could try creating something from sounds that you hear in your natural environment, whether that's nature or, you know, sounds from the town or the city outside. Anything really can be a source of inspiration. And in fact, there's a really good video that's, I think, just come out last week from and I've forgotten the guy's name, but it's on the Make Noise channel. They've just put out a video about sort of inspiration from around you. I'll put a link to the video down in the description, but in that video the guy goes through various different examples of creating sound from the world around you. I think at one point he creates the sound of like a waterfall. Another point he creates the sound of like ocean waves retreating back into the sea. I think there's a sound of a jet engine in there at some point. He does it all with the Make Noise gear, some of the new modules that have come out from Make Noise. But it is a really good example of somebody who is really sort of delving into sound design and using inspiration from the sounds around them to create interesting textural sounds with their modular, you know. And that's something actually that I find quite interesting myself, probably more so than trying to create sounds from other pieces of music, but trying to create sounds from the environment around you, because it kind of forces you to think in almost sort of like non-musical ways, because after all, you know, a lot of the sounds that we hear outside, you know, they're not necessarily musical sounds, but they are interesting and they can add an interesting element to your pieces. You know, and this can sort of it can encourage you to sort of think, you know, sort of symbolically as well, in terms of how you're patching. You know, sort of trying to think how can I create or how do I create breadth through, you know, what's going on with voltages and so on. So let's say, you know, you've got that sound, wherever it's come from, whether it's from a piece of music or from the world outside you. What are you going to do next? So, well, first of all, you probably got to start in your head, and you've got to kind of imagine the sound in your head and listen to that sound internally before you even approach the synth. And as I said a moment ago, you know, try and think about you know, what is the waveform? Is it stable? Is it being modulated? What kind of space is it in? And you might even try and make some notes on that first, before you start getting into the to the modular. You know, and that can be a great thing to do, and I do that myself as well as, you know, in my notebook, which I've been through many times, as well as recording what I've done and recording my patches in there. Sometimes I will also plan things out. So especially if it's a particular sound that I'm trying to figure out how to create that sound, I'll make a few notes first, and maybe you know, an idea of what I think is going to be a signal flow or you know, a patch for that sound, and that will be my starting point, which I'll then go to the synth and then start you know, patching that together. Once that is patched together, you know, again, the next step is to listen, and you think to yourself, well, does it sound close to the original sound, or is it a little way off yet? And if it is that it's not quite sounding correct, well, that's where you then will start to adjust your patch, you know. And again, it's through listening. So listening is probably the most important thing. But you're going to listen to that sound, and you're going to tweak things, and you're going to try and think what is different between this sound that I have created and the sound that I'm trying to get to. What is missing from this sound, or what is extra in this sound that shouldn't be there? You know, because that can be the case as well. Sometimes we can overcomplicate things. You know, so it's a case of then, you know, iteratively going through, adjusting, playing it back again, listening carefully again, comparing again, changing things, and so on, and just keeping going through that loop of listening, adjusting, and so on. And every time that you do that, you will learn something about your system, and you will learn something about the modules that you're working with. And you know, you'll discover new things, and you'll expand your vocabulary as well. You know, and it might be that you don't actually create the sound that you're after, but on the way, you might discover something new and interesting that's actually more valuable than the sound that you were trying to create originally. So, you know, that can be almost like a little sort of unexpected gift. You know, not getting it right is not necessarily failure, and that's something else that we kind of talk about a lot on this channel, that, you know, the happy accidents and the surprises, and sometimes when things go wrong, actually that's the real reward. So, you know, failed attempts actually can be more positive than you think, and you can sometimes come up with a new sound that you love even more than the original sound that you were trying to create. You know, and just try and remember that it's not about trying to it's not about perfection and trying to get that sound perfectly matching, but it's about sort of trying to build some kind of fluency where you can hear a sound, and then you can have some idea about what's happening with that sound, and it gives you a starting point with creating your own sounds. Because then if you can imagine a sound in your head that you've not heard before, and you can then start thinking about, well, you know, what would I want to do to make that sound? You know, you can do that because you've practiced recreating these other sounds. Now that itself is kind of an interesting thought as well. Maybe that's a topic for another video. You know, hearing a sound in your head, imagining a sound that you've not heard before. Is that something that we can actually do? Or, you know, how easy is it to imagine a sound that you've not heard before? Or when you imagine a sound, if you analyze it deeply enough, will you find that that sound that you imagine, that you think you've not heard before, actually probably is more similar to a sound that you have heard before? And you know, what's the phrase they say? Nothing new under the sun. You know, everything that we conceive has already been thought of by someone else at some point. So maybe, you know, it's not actually possible to think or to imagine new sounds, but it might be a sound that you have heard before, but you've forgotten that you've heard it. But still, you can still have a good stab at recreating that sound for yourself. So I would urge you to try this out. You know, try recreating sounds, whether they be natural sounds, environmental sounds, or sounds from other pieces of music. And remember, the recreating the sound is really just the starting point. And you know, the real value is in the actual attempt at that recreation. So yeah, I would encourage you to try this out. Try recreating some sounds and see what happens. Let me know in the comments if you come up with some interesting ideas. Remember, you don't need a songbook to learn these things from. You just need to listen to the world around you, and that will be your songbook. Sounds a little bit corny, doesn't it? Okay, well, I hope you found this interesting, and let me know in the comments what you think about recreating sounds, or if you have yourself recreated sounds successfully. I'd just like to thank you for watching today, and remind you, if you have enjoyed the video, please hit the subscribe button. Okay, I will see you in the next video. Thank you very much. Cheerio.